Let's be real, this is your last chance. And if you're here watching this video, that means you want to change your future. And that is already the first step to your success. But considering the date, you're probably worried about your exams. Well, let me tell you a short story. Was I screwed? I asked around for any last-minute advice. So guess what others told me? They told me to, number 1, give up, and number 2, pray to God. So guess what I did? I worked my tail off. I grinded as hard as I could. And I got 92% in that exam. The moral of this story is to never limit yourself, because everything can change in a matter of days, and in this case, even hours. Here are the things we're going to cover in today's video. Thank you very much for all your love and your support in the previous video. I will try to be as brief and concise as possible, because what you need right now isn't binge-watching content, but actually implementing the tactics. I didn't understand most of the content, but I got all A stars. And meanwhile, a lot of my friends could perfectly explain and teach the content to me, but their marks were lower than mine. But why? Life isn't fair. No, I touched on this in my previous video. The way how I could get high marks in such a short period of time was through my study tactics, my revision techniques, and my exam strategies. When you're learning for exams, tactics are more important than understanding. When you study, you have to consider your end goal. Is your goal to get good exam marks, or is your goal to really understand your subject? That depends on what kind of subject it is, if it's something you're interested in pursuing in the future or not. So if I could do it, you can too. How do we create a productive schedule? We can do this through interleaving practice, studying in blocks, taking mindful breaks, understanding how your body responds, and training your body for exams. Don't worry if it sounds complicated, because I will explain them right now. Interleaving practice is when we are mixing different topics within a single study session. Since you have many subjects, you can take a break from one with the other, so that your brain is constantly engaged and not drowning in one subject. Another method is the complete opposite, which is blocking, focusing on one specific subject for an extended period. It is particularly beneficial if you're preparing for exams, because it kind of mirrors the conditions you'll face during the actual test. Breaks can make or break productivity. They can prevent your mental fatigue if you take them wisely. Understanding how your body responds is also super important. Personally, I'm more of a night owl, which is suitable for performing. I can't focus during the afternoons. So by understanding these factors, I could schedule my revision to be the most optimized as possible. Training your body for exams. If you want to run a marathon, you don't just go there on the day and do it, right? You always need to prepare. You have to prepare for that kind of stamina. And how do you do this? By trying to train yourself to be in that kind of environment. And this will give you a huge advantage when you're taking the exam. You need to put in the time. If you're not where you want to be yet, it's time to catch up. So how hard are you willing to grind for your future? Alright, past paper revision techniques. If you've made it here, you clearly care about efficient and effective learning, so please consider subscribing. I would love to share more juicy content to provide value for you. Past papers are such a great way to revise, but how do you actually revise one? Let's look at the formats of past paper study, types of past paper study, and how to learn from mistakes. We've got simulated testing versus memory retention. What does that mean? Simulated testing is as if you're in the actual exam, so you try not to have any distractions if possible, and use the time limits for each section. I would actually recommend taking less time than recommended, because in an exam, goodness knows what will happen. Meanwhile, memory retention is ideal for STEM subjects, where there is a specific mark scheme you need to adhere to. So what you want to do is to finish a question, including all the sub-questions or the mini-questions within a question, and then check it with the mark scheme immediately. So this is if you do not have so much time. So it depends on what stage of your revision you're at and how much time you have left. Here are the types of past paper study. Reverse engineering is when you look at the mark scheme before attempting the questions. For example, if you're looking at a science paper, you look at the mark scheme, then you can kind of guess what kind of question will appear. So that way, if you see that question in an exam, you can link it to the mark scheme. Thematic analysis is to do past paper questions by the theme or topic rather than the order they appear. This can help you to identify patterns in question types and topics. Now, question dissection is when you break down the question to analyze their components. So this is how you can understand the correct answers and why some choices are wrong. How do you learn from mistakes? Error analysis. Instead of just correcting the wrong answers, you want to reflect on each mistake. Now, how do you actually remember the mark scheme, especially in such a limited amount of time? The key thing, the number one thing, is to just do them. There's no shortcut for this really. The more past papers you do, the more you will realize how similar they are. But you need to learn these patterns, and learning these patterns takes time and practice. Focus on the keywords. Memorize the words which often reappear on the mark scheme. Often you will lose marks, as in you will not get the mark, if you understand the concept but you used the wrong words, the wrong terminology, especially in science where some mark schemes are very specific on what words they want you to use and what words they will not give you the mark for. Now, how do we boost study effectiveness? As we covered before, study at your best hours and rest when you're not studying. Please don't try to overclutter your brain with other things. You can do that once your exams have finished. I read every single comment on my previous video and I saw a lot of your motivation. What's your reward for all this hard work? Of course, you're working for your future, but also give yourself a small reward, something that you enjoy. Here are some more subject-specific strategies. I went through some of these on my previous videos. For maths, there's no shortcut, because no amount of theory can replace implementing your knowledge. English, literature and language. For seen extracts, make a table of quotes and analysis, and for unseen, plan all the list of techniques you can instantly identify. You can practice this with other unseen extracts. For modern foreign languages, learn as much vocab as you can, because this will come really handy, especially in the listening and writing papers. For history, learn the timeline, learn key dates and a few facts, at least a few facts for each event. For all sciences, as I mentioned before, learn the keywords from the mark scheme and go through as many past papers as you can. At this point, do not spend the majority of your time trying to understand new things. Instead, you will learn around like 80% of what you need to know for your exams through past papers. This is for IGCSE Edexcel Chemistry. Here are exam tactics no one talks about. At least I have personally watched so many study videos online and I have not seen any of these before. Number 1, how you can get more marks with this trick. This is pulled from an IGCSE Edexcel Biology past paper. You can see it's a 5 marker. We have 110 marks for science. So that's like almost 5% of the entire grade. You would logically just write 5 points, right? But let's have a look at the mark scheme. On the mark scheme, look at this. There are 10 possible answers which you can use. So what does this mean? If, for example, there are 3 marks in a question, write minimum 4 to 5 answers, because the chances of you getting 3 correct, if you write 5 of them, will become much higher, right? And you will not get penalized for writing the wrong answers, although you will penalize yourself if you missed out this super easy way to get more marks. And just a note, do not contradict yourself in your answers, otherwise you will lose marks for just not making sense. Tactic number 2, how can you prepare for your exam to save time? You must plan ahead. Here's an example. For English, what you can do is you can pre-plan and remember your introductory paragraph, which can be used for any type of question. I did this for my scene exam and saved at least 15 minutes of brainstorming and ransacking through my brain for a grade 9 level opening paragraph in an actual exam. Your opening is so important. It's like when people say it takes you 0.1 seconds for someone to make a judgment about you. For an examiner, they will probably just spend 0.1 seconds of their time reading through your answers, and they're already going to form this judgment in their mind. Definitely take advantage of this to create an extremely strong opening. Here's a case study. This is the last thing I read before I walked into my English literature exam. You can download this for free via the link in my description. It's quite crude, it's quite rudimentary, but at this point you don't really want to make your notes look super duper aesthetic. So this was a summarization of the 62-page master document I made for English literature over that 12 hours. And I pre-prepared my essay opening. This is exactly what I remembered for my English literature exam. You can see I remembered that paragraph word by word. By the way, I do want to note that this was the statement of understanding and not the thesis statement, because if you only write this and do not write the thesis statement, you will not score good marks. But the thesis statement is something you need to plan when you're actually in the exam. If I try to come up with something as preposterous as that in the actual exam, it would have taken me at least 15 minutes, and every minute counts in the exam and every ounce of energy counts. Exam tactic number 3. What do you do right before your exams? You need to plan exactly what you do as soon as you open your paper. So while chatting with your friends, giving words of encouragement, that is extremely important. You also want to think at the back of your mind what you're going to do exactly as soon as you sit down and open that paper, because time is your greatest enemy in every exam. We want to try and save save as much brain power and time before our exams, so we can spend our efforts on the things we can't plan. So what can we plan? As I mentioned, paragraph openings, mnemonics to keep us on track, checklists for your questions, which is primarily for essay-focused exams. Although you're probably very familiar with these kind of checklists, just writing them down in your exam will help you a lot, since there's a lot of things which, when you're in that exam, you might not remember actively. Blurt anything you want to keep in mind as soon as the paper begins. So, for example, if you just revised something which you're not very comfortable with or not very confident in, just write down any key points about that as soon as possible. You can spend around 5-10 minutes depending on the exam just planning. With a solid plan, you can get further in your exams. And do this even before reading the questions. Exam tactic number 4. So, how to plan your time during the exam. My biggest advice would be to always skim the entire paper before answering any questions. This ensures you know what kind of questions you will face, and then you know what you require extra time or less time to spend on. And start with harder questions which you have just revised, but if there are harder questions which you haven't revised recently, skip them and do the easy ones first. For example, in maths, we got like 10 questions worth just for vectors, and I was so mad because the year before, vectors was my strongest subtopic in maths, but I had completely neglected it for my actual revision, so I probably got 0 marks on that. So I spent my time on some other hard questions which I had revised recently to try and get higher marks for them first. You do want to aim to spend as little time as possible on the easy questions. Exam tactic number 5. What do you do if you're running out of time? Always try and skim over your answers, even if it is just for 5 minutes or 2 minutes. There might have been some key information which you left out. Exam tactic number 6. This might sound so simple, and I kind of covered it a little bit earlier on, but it was my number 1 pitfall for every exam. Always read the question multiple times. Now, how do you make the most out of exam season? As exams are looming ahead, it's normal to start feeling a little bit on edge and want to cram as much as possible. I would highly recommend to not discuss your exam after you have completed it. There were some papers which I finished, then I went straight onto the online forums and I asked, oh my gosh, what did you get for like question 8B? And everyone's answer would be different to mine. And then I'd go like, oh gosh, what did I do? But instead of spending that time just stressing over the things which you've already done, which you can't change anymore, just focus on the things you can change. I would recommend maybe just briefly looking through or discussing these kind of answers if it was a paper 1 or part of multiple papers, because then you can identify what you need to work more on. And also, please do not listen to any rumors. There's always going to be some kind of huge drama during exam season, but that is out of your control. So please spend that energy on revising for your other exams. Mindset. The first step to success comes from your mindset. I saw there were quite a few comments on my previous video saying, I'm cooked, or am I cooked, or there's no hope for me now. But please, even if you joke that you're cooked, that sets a negative precedent. Please do not think or make these type of jokes. Have some faith in yourself. No matter how difficult the obstacle is, whether it's for your GCSEs or for your life in general, everything is always achievable if you don't give up on yourself first. In my previous video, I did mention that I made many revision notes, and guess what? They are now available. So you can head over to my website, the link will be in my description, and you can download all of these notes for your own use. Because as I said before, time is your greatest enemy in exam season when every minute counts for your revision. So instead of making your own notes, making your own summaries, why don't you leverage mine? Because I wish I could have found someone with these resources. I'll be honest with you, doing GCSE didn't really help a lot because there were not many resources online, which is why I want to share as much as possible with you. You got this. Now that you've watched this, you can use these tactics to the full, implement them. Do ask more questions in the comments. Do ask your teachers for predictions. If your teachers do not have many predictions, do go online, ask on some forums, then maybe other schools have the resources. I wish you the best of luck. You've worked extremely hard. You deserve an amazing summer holiday, but just this final push. I know it's hard. I know there's times where you feel like you're burnt out, but keep going. You can make it until the summer.
Oh, 来了 A star 哇真的